Welcome to this fantastic episode of B2B Bytes. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Isaiah Bollinger, CEO and co-founder of Trellis, a leading e-commerce solutions provider. He has deep passion for B2B e-commerce and runs what is arguably the world's top B2B e-commerce podcast. Welcome to the show, Isaiah.
Thank you. Really appreciate you guys bringing me on. I'm excited that we're seeing more of this content out here around B2B, which, 10 years ago was not really, there wasn't really anything.
Well, it's great to have you on. Today, we're going to be discussing the topic of e-commerce adoption amongst your B2B customers. B2B customers that have often been buying through a sales team may be apprehensive to shopping online, right? And so we're going to dive into the best tricks and tips for getting those customers to move online. And Isaiah, maybe you could just kick us off by talking about the biggest challenges that B2B businesses face in getting those customers to move onto their new e-commerce site.
Yeah. Well, I think the first one, the obvious one, is technology and making the experience relevant or similar to what you would get offline. So making sure that the pricing is the same as what they would call in. So maybe they have customer specific pricing. So you have these technology challenges that are sometimes a hurdle. But I think what is actually often underestimated is even if you solve those, which I think a lot of companies are like, oh, if I solve all these technology problems, then everyone will start using the B2B e-commerce site. And that's what we're finding is that's not always the case. You maybe get more adoption or you maybe get, slightly higher average order value or some success from the technology piece. But there's a whole other kind of like cultural marketing adoption piece that's quite hard to do, I think.
And so as you think about that resistance, let's call it, we're getting resistance from our customers. How should businesses think about trying to tackle that, to change the customer behavior that's beneficial for them and also beneficial for the business?
Yeah, well, I think incentives always work, right? So, I think trying to do some simple incentives around, hey, maybe $200 off your first order, at least try and get them to online order, right? So start offering, maybe you have like an average order value, like limit or something, so they can't like place a $200 order for free or something. But, having some sort of incentive to get them to at least start using the website is a good first step. So I think there's getting people to buy for the first time and then kind of figuring out like, well, why, maybe they bought for that incentive, but it wasn't a good enough experience for them to buy again, right? And then figuring out what's causing that. And a lot of times it's kind of understanding because they're a business. And I think people kind of forget that it's like, this is their job. It's not like them having fun buying on the website. They're trying to buy efficiently, get the information they need, get a good price, make sure they have good service, make sure it's going to come on time. And also a lot of times it needs to go to their system. So their e-procurement systems, Coupa or whatever. And so there could be like a punch out mechanism that needs to happen or an integration into their system so they don't think they're having to do double entry. So a lot of these companies don't want to order through e-commerce because they can order through EDI or through their own systems. So they only have to do it once. So there's all these little nuances that might be stopping them from ordering on the website that have nothing to do with what you think is the problem.
So Isaiah, you're saying that when you're ordering chairs for the Trellis office, that isn't the fun that you have when you're ordering on Amazon. Gotcha. But what I really heard there was it's about understanding your customer journey.
Yeah.
How do they place orders? Are they using a Coupa today? Are they shopping through your sales team or using your sales team for a specific reason? How should businesses think about gathering that data, gathering that information so they can better understand that journey?
So I would start by thinking about the different types of buyers, right? So I think the way I like to think about it, this is very simplistic. So everyone's going to have different nuances and complexity in their business. But I think you have the small businesses, maybe one location, and they're going to operate most similarly to a consumer. And they might just need, bulk pricing or just availability, good pricing, convenience and simplicity. And those are going to be the easiest ones. I think that's like the first cohort that I would try and automate and bring online because it's probably not very profitable to have sales reps spending a ton of time taking those orders anyways. And then I think you have the kind of the second cohort, which is kind of like your mid-market. Maybe they have multiple locations. Maybe it needs to get into their ERP system to track the inventory that they've purchased. So there's like layers to the purchase, right? They they need to buy it maybe for a project or a job, and they need to have some way of like knowing how much they bought, whether it's in their systems or some sort of thing about their business. And this is where you start to get more into like company accounts, potentially requisition lists or company wish lists. I like to call it company wish list because no one really knows what a requisition list is. Like,
In our business, they know,
yeah,
Isaiah.
and then I think you have like the third segment, which is just like very large enterprise companies, and that's where I think it's going to be more of like your digitally assisted sale. It's going to be hard to get away from like a sales rep or EDI and some of these things, but I think there are ways to get them to adopt e-commerce so that you can gain the data and the value of having them transact through e-commerce, which I think adds a lot of like data value and kind of like you can do recommendations, you can do all these things that you couldn't do if they just call you up, you know. So I kind of segment the complexity of your the buying processes between your different buyers. That's a very simplistic way of thinking about it, though.
I think that's exactly how businesses should think about it. That's such a great insight. Segment by the complexity of the buying process and take those simpler buying processes online first. I often think of it as sort of 80-20, right? 80% of your customers are these simple processes, right? They probably generate 20% of your revenue, and they probably take up 80% of
They
your
might not even be
sales team
profitable.
time.
Honestly, like a lot of these companies, they're probably, when you like break it down per order, it's not profitable, but they don't want to lose it because, you know, it's the long tail and maybe some of them grow into bigger customers. And so the manual processes are probably killing the margins on those orders.
Yeah. You mentioned right at the end with the enterprise, you said assisted sales process, right? It's still, the sales team is still involved. How can a sales team help to move these buyers online, move them onto the e-commerce site?
Well, I think that's where you make it so that at the very least, the request a quote functionality, something like that, where maybe you're doing bespoke solutioning, whether it's them creating a requisition list for a future large project or requesting a quote for a large project or something complicated where there's like almost a solutions consulting perspective to the buying process, which is really where I think the future of sales is, right? Is more solutioning and not just selling anymore, because the idea of selling it can and is more and more automated. So you're really solutioning something. And in that case, it's like, how can you use the website so they can visualize what they're buying versus like having an email or, you know, maybe like a static proposal that's not dynamic, you know?
It's less transactional and more consultative in nature. That makes a lot of sense. Your salespeople add value to that process when they're being consultative and they are solution selling, not when we're talking about purely processing a transaction. Do you often find that you have to train up a sales team with the companies that you work with? Do you have to train them how to use the site? And then do they act as trainers for your customers?
We don't usually do that ourselves. Usually we try and train their maybe e-commerce teams or their technical teams to do that. And then they're kind of training the sales reps themselves. Like that core, you know, kind of e-commerce team is then going and training their own sales teams. But honestly, like, because it's hard for us, we're 2 layers removed from that. It's hard for us to know like how effective that is or how well they're doing at that. So we do a lot of training, but it's hard to like, we're not necessarily, people don't want to pay for that, to be honest. And at least, you know, with our kind of costs and fees, it's usually something that they want to try and do themselves.
They train their teams will then train the sales teams. And then do you see the sales teams acting as trainers for the end buyer?
Sometimes, yeah. I think the better customers, in terms of like better as in they're further along in the e-commerce journey, are doing that. And they're making more of a conscious effort to do that. That's a big difference, I think, between the ones that are really adopting e-commerce quickly and the ones that are kind of lagging behind. Are the ones where like the sales team's involved and maybe requesting features and like wanting their customers to use it.
Gotcha. We covered quite a lot there. If I'm a manufacturer distributor, maybe I've just gone online and I'm seeing that the adoption for my site is not picking up. It's not what I thought it was going to be, and I'm not necessarily proving the ROI for the project. What do you recommend that they do to try and increase that adoption?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to give you like a straight answer because it depends on their business. I think the first thing I would try and figure out is, you know, what of that 80-20, right? The smaller customers, especially, like, why are they not using it? Because if the smaller customers are not using it, like, that's a pretty big red flag to me as to Like, why are they calling in? Is the website so bad that they don't even want to place a $200 order or $500 order? I can understand why you're having trouble getting adoption from like 100,000 or $1 million orders and these big B2B orders, right? That's going to be much harder. But if you're having trouble with the smaller orders, it probably means there's something wrong, or they're not educated. You're not emailing them. You're not doing email marketing. So email is a good one, making them aware of it, making sure the sales reps are making them aware of it. So, I mean, awareness is a big piece, right? Why are they not using it? Why are they not aware of it? And then there's probably some sort of experience problem. Sometimes it's as simple as like the pricing is better when you call in. That's like a very obvious problem, right? Like, why would you ever order online when you can call in and get a better price? You know.
That makes so much sense. You've got to match the experience. You've got to understand that buyer journey and make sure it's smooth, and then ensure that your buyers know it's available. This isn't a build it and they will come situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to answer that without just saying we need to do a survey and talk to their customers. That's what I would do. So what I would do is go talk to your customers and figure out why they're not using the website, and they'll tell you. It sounds very simple, but a lot of people just don't take the time. I think also they're kind of like not really trying to get objective feedback sometimes, or they're not doing it in a way that gets objective feedback. Because obviously when you ask for feedback, there's always a little bit of like I don't want to hurt this person's feelings, or the website sucks. Like that might be the real answer, right? And that you have to kind of dig for the real answer sometimes.
100%. That makes sense. Survey your customers, but try and do it such that they can be objective in their responses. Isaiah, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am sure the listeners have gained so much, a much better understanding of how they can increase adoption of their new e-commerce sites.